Hi, great to be here. So I'd like to start us off with a little experiment. I know you've just come back from lunch, but nonetheless, would you please stand up? Close your eyes, and then think about the following question. Bring yourself back to the best moment of your professional life. Where were you? Who were you with? What did it taste like? What did it feel like? You got that moment, hold it, and now turn to a neighbor, left or right, and whisper it into their ear. Slightly uncomfortable, but try. Thank you. We're going to come back to that, so keep in mind the moment that you were thinking of and that you shared. I'd like to bring you back to a moment that was very important to me, although I wasn't born yet, that I believe has shaped our professional lives until today. And that moment occurred 200 years ago, in the year 1816, when a curious group of British tourists descended upon Lake Geneva in Switzerland, among them Lord Byron, John Keats, the Shelleys, and they celebrated what is now known as the Summer of Love, revolting against the prevailing sentiment of the time, which was reason, pragmatism, and enlightenment, supported by copious amounts of opium and alcohol as well. So of course I'm talking about the Romantic movement, the traditional Romantic movement, and that was probably best described by the German Romantic poet Novalis, who wrote, if you will, the mission statement of the movement, which you can see here. To romanticize the world is to make us aware of its magic, mystery, and wonder. It is to educate the senses, to see the ordinary as extraordinary, the familiar as strange, the mundane as sacred, the finite as infinite. So I wonder and ask myself every morning when I get up, what would the romantics make of our times where Volkswagen, breaks the hearts of millions of customers by cheating on them? What would the romantics make of this event recently in France? These are real images where disenfranchised employees mobbed two executives of Air France and really stripped them of their clothes. What would the romantics make of today's workplace where we're expected to be flawless, consistent productivity machines? Where we're used to hearing you can only manage what you measure? Where we're now told that the algorithmic corporation is the next big thing. What would they make of Uber introducing surge pricing in Sydney during the hostage crisis because an algorithm told it to do so? What would they make of Facebook, which included in one user's annual highlights this picture of his 4-year-old daughter who had died that very year, and the user called it inadvertent algorithmic cruelty? And what would the romantics make of this application called Spreadsheets that allows you to enhance your sexual performance in bed based on data analytics? And if that doesn't work, you can use this service called Breakup Text, which allows you to send automated text messages. Or if you really want to stay away from the whole game, you can use this service called Invisible Boyfriend. I hear there's an invisible girlfriend in beta. An invisible boyfriend basically allows you to hire a fake boyfriend who sends you fake text messages, fake emails, and even makes fake phone calls at the opportune time. So in light of all these applications and events, it's interesting to ponder, have we already entered the uncanny valley of us falling in love with our operating systems, with the machines, with artificial intelligence? Like so beautifully depicted in the movie Her by Spike Jonze, about which the New York Times wrote, the great question is not whether machines will be able to think, the question is will humans still be able to feel? And indeed, when everything is measured, quantified, made familiar, predictable, convenient, where do we find these profound experiences that punctuate our routines? Where is the magic? Where are the strangers, the strangeness? Where's the romance? I believe we are at risk of engineering the romance out of our lives. Romance, which perhaps is the ultimate differential in a world of maximizers and optimizers. Now, that all sounds pretty apocalyptic and sobering, but the good news is that 200 years ago, we've been at a point of such disenchantment before, where the original romantics stood up against the age of reason and enlightenment by espousing emotion and ambiguity and mystery in response to the disenchantment at that time. And I would argue that we need a new romantic movement, this time in business, this time led by business people who can be the new romantic poets of our time in response to the disenchantment which is now caused by the datafication of everything, the quantification of everything. Now, looking at your faces, you might wonder, it's like, whoa, this sounds great, but how do we do that? How can one be a romantic in business? And I thought it might be interesting by starting to identify those who are not romantics, like the the enemies of business romance. So enemy number one is the cynic about whom Oscar Wilde famously wrote, he knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. The cynic divides the world into winners and losers. For the cynic, basically the maxim is, it's business. It's not personal, it's business. For the romantic, business, though, is deeply personal. Enemy number two is the number-crunching data analyst. So I have nothing against data, but am worried about those data analysts who really believe in data-based evidence as the only source of objective truth. And I live in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, so I'm surrounded by quite a few. And enemy number three is the augmented, super optimized, super quantified self that apostles such as the Singularity University and others promote to have our organizations grow exponentially. But I didn't just want to stop at this negative definition of romance. I also wanted to create a positive vision of business romanticism by identifying the design principles of business romance. And I created 10 rules of enchantment, and 3 of which I want to share with you today. So let's start with the first, which is called Find the Big in the Small. Recently come across a really staggering statistic which states that the average American has only one close friend, and that number is declining, or has been declining over the past few years. Some proclaim this to be the age of loneliness, or state a crisis of friendship because of that. But you might wonder, how is it possible in a hyper-connected age that anybody could be lonely? But there's a difference between togetherness and intimacy. And as the writer Richard Bach said, the opposite of loneliness is not togetherness, it's intimacy. And we are in desperate need for more intimacy in our digital age. And I think it's encouraging that we're seeing a surge of customer and workplace experiences that cater to that craving for intimacy. For example, the renaissance of the good old dinner format. There's a grassroots phenomenon, a series that's becoming quite popular in the States. It's called Let's Have Dinner and Talk About Death, which is a very unlikely invitation. But the founder of this series, Michael Hebb, says it's not true that we don't want to talk about the dignity of a good death. We just haven't gotten the right invitations yet. Or take this social experiment called the I Am Here Days, run by my friend Pia Parker and her husband in New York City. So here's how it works. They gather 15, 20 people one Sunday a month to explore a neighborhood of New York City. No digital distractions, no devices. They commit to being together for 8 hours or more non-stop, based on the principle that they believe you create more intimate, more meaningful connections if you spend 8 hours together, including all the inevitable boredom that unfolds, than 8 times 1 hour, right? If you're thickly present rather than thinly distributed across a variety of channels and media. And this idea of thick presence, of course, is something that artists have perfected. For example, Marina Abramovic, the performance artist who, at her exhibition, The Artist is Present at MoMA in New York, did just that. She was literally sitting across from one visitor at a time, I think for 5 minutes each, for a total of 716 hours, celebrating vulnerability and intimacy. I mean, quite literally. Imagine what that might look like in business if we had thick days that celebrated thick presence, if we locked ourselves into a room with one person at a time to pursue one idea, one project, no distractions, no meetings, or if we went on walking meetings, right, that are not only more intimate, but also, as neuroscience tells us, more creative and more productive. In fact, neuroscientists say that the optimal pace for a productive meeting is 1.8 miles per hour. So this might all sound very nostalgic to you, dinners and I Am Here days and walking meetings, but nostalgia is often misunderstood as a longing for a time gone by, when in fact it comes from the Greek term nostos algos, that means literally pain from an old wound. And it describes the aching for something that is profound, something essential that we seem to have forgotten, that we seem to have disconnected ourselves from. There's a growing body of workplace and customer experiences catering to this sense of nostalgia. For example, the maker movement, DIY, the rise of local artisans, all of which are trying to overcome the alienation between maker and product. Or take the rise of the curatorial, with a very prominent example of brainpickings.org, run by Maria Popova, a site that basically is an assortment of articles to hundreds of thousands of subscribers based only on the taste of that one person, Maria Popova, not on an algorithmic recommendation engine. And I believe we are craving these old-fashioned concierges, these nostalgic figures who treat us as unique, subjective individuals, offering us an escape path from an algorithmic world. And by the way, I'm not against data, I'm not against technology. In fact, I believe that technology allows us some great opportunities to romanticize experiences. One of my favorite examples is this app called Forgotify, which lets you discover the 4 million songs that have never been played on music streaming service Spotify. So it uses an algorithm to turn against an algorithmic world. And it creates a platform for the strange, for the quirky, for the romance that awaits us at the lonely end of the long tail. Or take the realm of professional social networking. There's a startup called Somewhere that is taking on LinkedIn, and the founder of Somewhere says, LinkedIn, well, it's sort of like we endorse people we don't know for skills they don't have. And it's a very linear model, right, of presenting our work personas, where Somewhere is presenting our work personas as passions, as projects, as ideas, as narratives, right, in a very linear way. Small moments of attachment. And these small moments of attachment, as every marriage researcher will tell you, are integral to a successful, healthy marriage. And I believe they're also critical for a more meaningful life in business and beyond. It's the beauty of things that don't scale. The second rule of enchantment is called keep the mystique. Now, we live in a time where we're inundated with data, right? And radical transparency is embraced as the norm, really. Precisely because of that, I believe that secrecy and mystery make experiences meaningful again. When everything is open, nothing is open. So what do we choose to close, to hide? So the most literal way of injecting mystique into business is, of course, the surprise. It catches us off guard, like we are forced to show our true colors. And it shall come as no surprise that there's a service in New York called Startup Industries that does just that. It provides surprises as a service, or SaaS, as software developers would call it, for individuals and teams. Subscription boxes, Birchbox, for example, come to your house. They're curated. You don't know what's in them. And the interesting thing about these subscription boxes is it doesn't really matter in the end what is in them. The unpacking, right? The secrecy is really the product. And the same principle applies to a company called Secret Cinema that provides so-called mystery screenings. So they invite thousands of people to come to a surprise location to reenact in an immersive way a movie that they're showing, from Blade Runner to Casablanca to Grand Budapest Hotel. And what's interesting is that they're able to get thousands of people to come, although they don't know which movie they're going to show. And again, it doesn't matter which movie they're shown. The secret is the product. Prime Produce is a startup in New York City that runs meetings in the dark, not just to eliminate social bias, but also to add a little bit of drama, suspense, and mystique to a very conventional business format. Or take House of Genius, which is a professional networking series that does not disclose the identity of the participants. Secret rooms are the latest thing in Bay Area high-tech startup firms. They all have a secret room now. And at NBBJ, the company that I used to work for, we even launched a secret society to imagine our company's alter ego. And by the way, Etsy, the creative e-commerce site, also runs a so-called Ministry of Unusual Business, whose sole mandate it is to inject delightful surprises into work. No one knows who's exactly a member, when they're meeting, and what exactly they're doing, but the mandate is known to everyone. So again, it's the principle of mystique. So taking on multiple identities, accessing and commuting between different worlds, making the familiar strange again, those are core romantic traits, but they're also the qualities of augmented reality and virtual reality technologies. And I think you could argue that these technologies are the new romantic technologies of a new romantic era. And I think that's quite interesting because there's a moral component to this, which is the ability to foster empathy by putting yourself into the shoes of another person, by accessing different worlds, through your vivid imagination. And that's exactly what the World Economic Forum did in Davos last year. They handed out VR glasses to world leaders that allowed them pretty much to beam themselves and project into refugee camps in Jordan, or to go to countries that were devastated by Ebola. So I don't know how it came from mystery all the way to empathy and the moral capacity of romanticism, but all these formats create a new form of scarcity. Experiences and things that we never fully comprehend, that we never really possess, and that don't last, which, whether we like it or not, is also a hallmark of romance, right? All these formats restore friction and doubt in a world of total seamlessness and knowledge. Knowledge might be power, but not knowing is the more powerful experience. Which brings me to the third of the design principles, the third rule of enchantment, which is called suffer a little. Now, it's important to point out that romance is not identical with happiness. You have skin in the game, there's a dark side to it, right? You suffer a little bit. It's counter to the way we design our workplace and customer experiences, most of them at least, which are designed for instant gratification, convenience, and comfort. Just take Amazon, which will probably soon deliver everything we could possibly desire to our doorstep. And yet, at the same time, Why is it that we camp out in front of Apple stores before a new launch for days and nights with this religious fervor, right, for this brand? Why is it that we climb up the mountaintops of the Alps at the Tour de France just to see the leading bikers of the Tour de France fly by in 10, 15 seconds? And why is it that more than 50,000 people embark on this annual pilgrimage to the Black Rock, Nevada desert, to the Burning Man Festival, basically celebrating losing control in a week of radical self-expression? So when you talk to evolutionary psychologists, they will tell you that our brains are still wired for the Stone Age. We're still looking for these life-threatening, critical events that give our lives meaning, that make us feel come alive, that give us a sense of fitness. However, we have all but banned them from our modern domesticated societies, thank God. And yet we need them. We need them to feel alive. So what do? Well, we go bungee jumping, skydiving, we run ultra marathons, or we go to IKEA. IKEA has perfected the art of suffering. It has perfected the art of frustration, right? If you're like me and you go to the parkour, it's like the seventh circle of hell, and if you go home and you try to self-assemble a Billy Oslo clip-on piece of furniture, it's basically an exercise in sacrifice. It's a painful reminder of your own existential incompetence. And frustration is also, interestingly enough, the design principle of loyalty programs. Because they're never about instant gratification, they're all about permanent unfulfillment. We never cash in, let's be honest, we never cash in enough frequent flyer miles, right? It's this promise of eventual fulfillment. And the same is true for this really interesting nightclub in New York City called The Box. So I was at a conference and I heard the founder speak about this, and he was asked about the success of The Box. He said, why is it so successful? What is the factor of success? And he said, well, it's actually very simple. We study very, very carefully what our customers desire, and then we do the exact opposite, which in the case of The Box means that if you buy the highest priced ticket, you end up in the kitchen doing dishes because it puts you out of your comfort zone. You suffer a little bit, you deviate from the routine, you have a meaningful experience. And of course you remember that, right? Which worked so well precisely for that very reason. So the more we suffer, the more we sacrifice, the more we belong, the greater the labor of love, the more meaningful the experience. So ask your customers, colleagues, partners to make an effort. Let them suffer a little bit. Frustrate them. Let them wait so that they value what they cannot get and reap the ultimate reward, which is the desire intact, the thrill not gone. These are the 3 design principles, the rules of enchantment that I wanted to share with you today, which I hope illustrate the spirit of business romanticism. Find the big and the small, keep the mystique, and suffer a little. And I do believe that they indicate a broader shift in society, in particular in business, where a new set of virtues, of qualities become important, that eclipse the traits of the smart, connected age, where ephemerality, fleeting experiences replace permanence, where ambiguity really trumps clarity. Inconsistency is not only allowed, but becomes a feature. Danger over data, where we celebrate subjectivity over the idea of an objective truth, where we celebrate our unquantified self and not just the idea of a super-optimized, quantified self. We like comfort and convenience, of course, but we love those rebels and contrarians who give us a heavy dose of punch-drunk love, right? And I believe we need to learn again to value what we cannot measure and appreciate the beauty of things that don't scale. In the past years or so, there's been a lot of talk about humanizing business. How do we humanize business? And I think you can identify 3 pillars of more humane business. To start with the one at the very bottom, doing good, doing well by doing good has been pretty much a theme for the past few years and has gained some remarkable traction in business mainstream, and I think that's really good. The second one is basically feeling good, which I think is about work-life integration, balance, however you want to call it, mindfulness, well-being, and I think that's a conversation that has gained traction, which is really helping making business more humane. The one area that I feel really passionate about that I think we have underutilized is to feel more, to be able to show up at work and bring our full selves to work with a whole range of expressions and emotions. Why is that important? Well, Maya Angelou, the poet, put it quite beautifully. People will forget what you did, they will forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And in business, to use this iceberg metaphor, we spend so much time on the hard facts, right? Probably 80% on numbers and the hard facts, but not a lot of time on the soft factors. When in fact, we should probably do the opposite. Relationships, emotions, feelings, all those soft factors are integral and are crucial for the success of projects, but they also make business a much more humane and much better place. And I think going forward, brands, organizations, businesses, they have a choice. They can either be the epitome of the super quantified, super efficiency-driven, pragmatic, a cold-hearted algorithmic corporation like Amazon. Or they can be like Airbnb. It's not a nostalgic company. It's very data-savvy, very data-driven. At the same time, though, at the very core of the brand is this value proposition of connecting with a stranger, accessing a different world, creating an intimate experience with a person you don't know, commuting to another world. That's a very romantic proposition, and I think really that is why Airbnb is so successful and will continue to be successful. So I think we need to romanticize business in order to humanize business, and it comes with business benefits as well. If you're not innovative enough, well, maybe you're not foolish, not romantic, not daring enough to imagine the possibility of another world. If your customers don't love you, well, maybe you should give them more than just solutions to problems. And if your employees are not inspired, well, maybe purpose and perks do not suffice. Add some mystery, some drama, some intrigue to the mix. Fight for your right to romance. I really think it is a human right. So do not just design for convenience, design for friction. Extend the territory beyond the map and use data not just to demystify, but to mystify. I think romantics want to create things that are not only more useful, but also more beautiful. And business is our ultimate adventure. So how do you do that? How do you become a business romantic tomorrow, whether you are a card-carrying romantic already, whether you're a cynic or you're a closet romantic? How can you apply these principles tomorrow in your work? So William Wordsworth says, to begin, which is good advice. So there's 3 things I think you can do. First of all, you can, of course, apply the principles that I shared, those 3 or the 10 that are in my book, The Business Romantic, and apply them to your workplace and see what happens. And I promise you something unexpected, something beautiful is going to happen. And then secondly, if you are so inclined, you can join the Business Romantic Society, which is a network of like-minded business romantics all over the world. It's, of course, a secret society. You have to qualify. And then lastly, maybe that's the most modest ask that I have. Think about the experience that you thought of when I started this talk, the best moment of your professional life. What was that like? Was it a promotion? Was it a successful project? Or was it something very small, a very small, random intimate encounter, a very magical moment that wasn't even quite significant at the time? So I think the best thing you can do is just to frame the conversation in a different way and use the term romance in a positive manner. So many business people say, oh, I'm a business person, I'm not a romantic, or you're romanticizing, that's not good. Let's be level-headed and clear. And I think the 2 go together. Romance is a key part of business. The 2 are really twins. I am a business person, a marketer, but I'm also an unabashed, unapologetic romantic. I believe the world would be a better place if we had more romance in our lives. And I believe we must find it and create it in and through business. Thank you very much.